Welcome back, everybody. We're going to do something a little bit different today. I'm not going to show off anything from the world. However, the things I want to show off were inspired by something that I did do in my wife and I's world, our world. So we're going to hop over into creative world. I'm just going to try to make this a quick flyby to show off the essence of the idea. I know that there are mods that allow you to do board games. However, I don't use mods, and maybe other people don't use mods. Maybe you're on a server that doesn't have that mod. Maybe you guys are just playing on your own server with your friends and you didn't mess with the mods. Maybe you guys are doing LAN, whatever it is. Maybe you might find what I'm about to show off interesting. So let's take a look at it. All right, so in our world, I built a chessboard, much like this, right where we used to have our forge area. I've since relocated that to a blacksmith building, and so we had this big open space that I wanted to occupy. And so the way that I chose to occupy it, because I'm a giant fucking nerd, is with a chessboard. Now, in our world, I went with chert and slate, I believe. It might have been basalt still. But my colors are red and black, so I did red and black. And this one, I went with the traditional white and black. As you can see, we're using white marble and cream-colored uh, dishware, and then just black dishware with the, I'm 99% sure this is polished basalt. I have a little frame on the back there just as a place to put shelves because all of these things can be stored on the shelves. Except for, I believe, the flower pots, but you can just set those down next to it if you wanted, or even have a chest. There's different ways to store it. Technically, if you wanted, you could have crates lined up on the wall with the image of the item on it, or you could make signs that say what the pieces are, or even chisel little motifs of the pieces above where they're being stored. I initially, when I was going to make the chess piece, or chessboard rather, it was going to be decorative, and so I was going to chisel each individual piece. But then I realized that, like, if I did want to actually play chess, it would be harder to move the pieces because you'd have to break the block and move it. So I decided to opt instead for a little bit more abstraction. Technically, if you wanted to chisel the pieces, you absolutely could, and then technically I guess you could hop into creative and just select the pieces and then break them real quick and move them. But if you're in survival or on a server or something and you don't want to do that, then technically you could just use the dishware as I've done. Bowls just made sense to be the pawns. Where everything else got more difficult was what was going to be what in regard to the special pieces. So I went with a flower pot for the rooks. We did a crucible excuse me, for the bishop. They just seemed to make the most sense. And I initially was going to switch these around, but somebody on Reddit agreed with my subconscious that initially was battling for what was going to happen here. And because of the asymmetry of the jug, that has become the knight, which I realize I've actually positioned wrong. The knight should be right here. Wow. I'm going to keep that in for honesty's sake. But yeah, I guess I did this because I was initially operating under where I wasn't thinking about this being the bishop because of how it like has a point to the top. But the crucible between the two really works more as a bishop, and this guy absolutely should be the knight. So I did lay this out wrong. That's what I get for having two trains of thought running on the same track, I guess. But definitely need to have the queen as the pot and the king as the other pot. I think this is the cooking pot and that's the crock pot. If you wanted to switch these around, I reckon you could. I really wasn't sure myself which way to go with it. But you definitely want to make sure that you place these down center. It looks kind of weird when they're cockeyed into the corner spaces. But you can just pick these up and move them and actually play chess. And that's something that I felt was really neat and I wanted to share. And so because I did that, I was like, it got me thinking about what other games you could make in Vintage Story. Because it's not Minecraft. You don't have redstone. A lot of the same physics and game mechanics don't really apply here. It's a different game. It just looks like a block game. So I have to mess around to see what is actually possible. And so the first thing I came up with was kind of Connect 4. I initially had these all, as you can see, there's posts separating them. I initially did not have these posts, and all these blocks were sharing a wall with each other. However, because of the way the chiseling is, that whole middle strip had to be an empty space, which would work fine with things falling down, like just straight down like this. But the issue arose when you started dropping things from up here down. It could hit one and then roll off to the side, which could be its own game. You could have some kind of other set up where you drop it down and wherever it rolls to is the spot that it rests at. But with the way the physics work, it's almost always going to, roll to the lowest point. So I think you could turn off the loose soil setting in the game, and then it'd probably be all right from there on in. But I don't like if you're on a server somewhere that's not the setting, then obviously that's going to be different. But I think this works, even though, as you can see, there's technically a block space in between each block. But if you're paying attention, you can quite clearly see where the diagonals are. And so even with this format, if that's a setup, you should be able to still play the game as it's set up like this. So this is just my version of Connect 4. Technically, you could chisel this however you wanted to and make it much, much prettier. I just went with this to have something together. You could really just replace this chiseled piece that I have chiseled like a middle out of, like a square donut. You could really just replace this whole thing with glass to keep that stuff in and still have it visible. Whatever is more resource friendly or time friendly on your end is really what you can use. You just want to make sure you can see through whatever you're using to get at, like, to visualize and see, get your eyes on the sand and track how they're moving in the boxes. Blah. However, on the bottom, I do recommend a trap door, because then you can just reach right here and start breaking the sand and everything. Whereas if you have a block in the way, I guess you could do it right there, but it's just, I don't know, it seems more convenient this way. I initially was going to try to have something where they were on torches and would break and fall into water and funnel into a hopper, but this game just does not work like Minecraft, and I could not get it to do it, because when the sand falls, it doesn't break on the torch. It falls through, and then it falls onto the torch, and then it actually will just sometimes go right through it and not even get caught by the torch. But no matter what, the sand block doesn't break down into a pickable entity. It remains a block because of the way the physics are in this game. But as long as you have ladders up on the side, well, I can't fly right now, on the side, you should be able to come up here and drop the blocks in and, observe and witness where they're going and play the game. Like, you might want to have some kind of walkway or something to come out here so people can look, and then they'd walk over here to put their block in, or they could always just, have a puddle of water to jump down into, and then you can look at it and then climb back up the ladder. However you guys wanted to do it. I just wanted something to showcase the core concept. So I realized that I didn't have the time stopped, so I had to stop it before I could continue because it was going to get all kinds of dark. But this is darts. That's funny. I said it was getting all kinds of dark, and then the next thing I'm talking about is darts. That wasn't planned. That's just, I love... Is that alliteration? Is that still alliteration? I don't know. It's not really rhyming, but dark and darts, they sound similar. I don't know. I enjoy that type of shit. But anyway, this looks very, very ornamental and geometric. It was my attempt at a dartboard. Really, you could scale this up as big as you wanted to make this a lot smoother, or you could break these portions up into different sections to do your own point system. I just tried my best without going too hard in the paint to emulate a dartboard. And you can just grab a spear and throw that motherfucker to use it like it's a dart, however far back you want to be. Maybe how far back you throw and hit the target is where your point system is. But you can set something up and then chisel it however you want and then throw a spear at the motherfucker. Obviously, you can use dummies and bows and arrows, and you can make all kinds of shooting galleries and things like that. But I thought this was a neat way to specifically do darts. You could throw rocks. You can't throw knives, but the rocks don't stick into the wall. So spears just seem to be the way to go. So I felt like this was a way to show it off. Really, honestly, in hindsight, I could have broke this up into actual different scores, but to me, this functions as decor in a house. But then if you also wanted to play darts, you could just sit there and play darts. Just for shits and giggles. Over here is basketball. I tried this numerous ways. Technically, you can make this even better by hooking up a chute system to the bottom of this hopper and then running it into a trunk. And then it'll collect the balls, giggity, that you throw in there. Now, I just have some orange bauxite here, just to set up as if these were loaded up as if they were basketballs right next to me, so I can, shoot some half-court shots here. But I tried to where you actually do the throwing mechanic, where you use the rock like a weapon. They seem to either just bounce off or shatter against the hopper and the backboard. So the only real way to do this is to use Q and throw the rock out of your inventory. And I guess really with that, you could use any block to facilitate doing that because you're throwing it up there. You don't have to actually throw it. So you could use dirt blocks, you could use a pumpkin, whatever you wanted to just toss up in the hopper, and then it will fall out of the hopper. Now, in the heat of battle, it might be hard to track if it goes in, or if you're not paying attention, it might just fall out, and it might look like it dropped out of the hopper, which is where the shoot system would come in handy. And then you and your buddies could use different colored balls, giggity, and then keep track of who gets one in, giggity. Um, I think that's really it for the basketball. There's really not much to it. You could do a whole court. Obviously, you could chisel this to be completely different. I literally just threw this together to, again, convey the idea. But I thought this was a neat way to facilitate having basketball in the game. I really couldn't figure out a way to do soccer or anything like that. I'm sure there's other games you can make in this game, but I'm having a really hard time because there's really not any kind of automation mechanisms. And it really does not, like, the mechanics of the game do not work the same way as Minecraft. Like, the guts under the skin is not Minecraft at all. And so a lot of what you can facilitate in Minecraft, you can't really facilitate in Vintage Story, which I can see where that might suck, but it also opens up the opportunity to find new ways to do different things. So I thought these were neat examples, and there is one more that I think is kind of neat. I'm not as happy with it. I was trying so hard to figure out a way to do bowling or even curling, but the closest I could get was a form of curling. I was really hoping there was some way to do bowling or something like that, or pool. Couldn't make it work. I tried and tried. There's just no system in place to facilitate any of it. So basically, this is what we got. You can take the rocks and actually use the throwing mechanic, like the attack button, and toss them, and they will slide across the ice for a certain distance. However, I tried to chisel blue and red onto the ice, but once you chisel the ice, it stops being slippery, and so you can use that to make barriers and traps and things, but I just put some blocks in the middle of glass, red and blue. If you get on the blue, it's a point. If you get on the red, it's 5 points or something like that, and then you guys are just stand at opposite ends and slide your rocks across and keep score. Now, unfortunately, the rocks can't bounce into each other. That would be super interesting, but I think this is still a neat little mini game that you could do. So these are my 5 ideas. I'm sure there's other games you can make, and obviously, like, you can race your elk around a racetrack and race your boat through some water and things of that nature. But I was thinking more like actual games, and I guess basketball is not really so much a game. But if you set it up with a shoot system, it's kind of like that. The one in an arcade where you just throw the ball, the free throw machine, I guess. Really not sure what that's called. But I thought these were neat, so I figured I'd show it off. I've rambled enough. If you guys find these interesting, please like, comment, subscribe. If you have other ideas of possible games, let me know down in the comments, and I'll see if I can make it work. But I really put my brain through the ringer here trying to figure out what was possible. Really big fan of the chess, and I'm also kind of a really big fan of the basketball. The darts really just seems kind of like a sidestep to just using a bow and arrow against a dummy and, like, just, doing target practice. But it is neat if you can get a bigger size dartboard and have better scoring labeled on it. And then the Connect 4, I wish you didn't have to have the post in between it, but I mean, again, unless you turn off the soil collapse thing, the gravel or the sand, whatever you use to fall down that will have gravity, is going to fall off to the side too. So there's only one way to prevent that, and that's with the posts, unless you're going to, turn off that mechanic. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any feedback, let me know. Like, subscribe, all that good bullshit. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this. God, I hope this was a quick adventure. Thank you.